Everything, every hour is very strictly planned. And in the beginning, when people come into this type of structure, imagine it's super difficult for people to cope with this. Because you feel like, oh, I'm tired, I want to sleep right now. Yeah, but you can't sleep because it's just training time. Or, but actually now I would like to go out with my friends. Yeah, but you can't go out because now is the evening ceremony and afterwards you go to bed. So in the very beginning, there are many, many conflicts. That's where it comes from that, oh, these Buddhist rules, they are so strict. They don't allow anything. No, it's not they don't allow anything. It is you are testing yourself. You are testing yourself how much control can you have about your own mind. Because after some time, even with this hard structure, you start to be okay with all of it. It's okay for you to wake up at 6. It's okay for you to do the work, the cleaning work. It's okay for you that there's training. It's okay that there is this type of structure. And now the freedom has come.
Spread love, man.
Ever feel like real freedom's kind of like just out of reach, you know? Like no matter how much you try to control your life, there's always something in the way.
It's a constant struggle, right?
Totally. But what if the key to freedom was, well, more control?
Whoa. Okay, that's interesting. More control.
Yeah, no, right? It sounds kind of counterintuitive. But today, we're going to deep dive into this super fascinating conversation with a Buddhist monk, Shi Heng Yi. He's got some really, really thought-provoking views on how mastering yourself can actually lead to like a deeper and more lasting sense of freedom.
So we're talking self-mastery as the path to freedom.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's this monk's take on it?
Well, he kind of turns the whole idea of freedom on its head. You know, we usually think of freedom as this lack of rules, no restrictions, just doing whatever we want.
Right, like total freedom to do anything.
Yeah. But he's saying, no. True freedom comes from mastering ourselves, not the world around us.
So it's about inner control, not external control.
Exactly. So let's start with this idea of monastic life, you know, like in a monastery. When I picture a monastery, I immediately think of a very structured, almost restrictive environment.
Lots of rules.
Totally. So how does that even tie into freedom?
That's the really cool part. Shi Heng Yi describes that initial shock of like entering monastic life. Strict routines, lack of personal choice. It's a total 180 from the freedom most of us are used to.
It's like a boot camp for your mind.
Seriously.
Yeah.
He actually uses the term culture shock to describe that adjustment period. Like, imagine wanting to sleep in or hang out with your friends, but you can't because the schedule says otherwise.
That's intense.
Right. But here's the thing. He explains that these restrictions aren't meant to punish you, but to actually, like, test and strengthen your inner control.
Oh, I see. So it's about building that mental discipline.
Exactly. You're pushing through discomfort, you're surrendering to this structure, and eventually you reach a point where, you know, those external circumstances don't control your inner state anymore.
So even in that disciplined environment, there's a deeper sense of freedom.
Totally. And that's where it gets really interesting. Shi Heng Yi argues that this inner freedom, it's something we can all cultivate regardless of like our external situations.
So it's not about your environment, it's about your mindset.
Right. True freedom isn't about controlling the world around us. It's about like mastering our reactions to it.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this connects to self-control, but how do we even start to master those internal reactions?
Well, one of the key things he talks about is finding balance. And it's about understanding our, what he calls two sides.
Two sides. What does he mean by that?
He's saying that every part of us, like every aspect of our being, it has at least two opposing forces at play. And to achieve balance, we need to understand these different parts of ourselves that need to be balanced.
Can you give us like a real world example of that?
Totally. Imagine someone who's like constantly chasing money and success, but totally neglects their relationships.
Happens all the time, right?
Right. They're so focused on one side, the drive for achievement, that they haven't explored the other side, like the need for connection. And so to really appreciate relationships, they might need to like actually experience the downsides of only focusing on money.
So it's kind of like you need to experience both extremes to find that middle ground.
Yeah. It's not about denying one or the other, but about like understanding how they, you know, work together and influence each other. And by consciously engaging with both, we can find that sweet spot.
Okay, this is making more sense now. But how does this apply to like our emotions? especially the tough ones like anger or jealousy.
Right. Those can be super intense.
Exactly. They can kind of take over.
Totally. And that's where the real work of self-control comes in. Shi Heng Yi says that these difficult emotions, they're universal. We all experience them.
Everyone feels them.
Yeah. But he says we have choice in how we deal with them.
So it's not about suppressing them, but about managing them.
Exactly. Shi Heng Yi has this really powerful analogy for anger. He says it's like burning all the wood you've carefully gathered for winter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you risk destroying relationships and everything.
That's such a strong image. So he's saying unchecked anger can really hurt us and the people around us.
Exactly. That's why he says it's so important to build a healthy relationship with these emotions. Not pretend they don't exist, but understand them and learn to respond in a way that doesn't cause damage.
Okay, I think I'm getting that. So we've talked about self-control in monastic life, finding balance within ourselves, and how to deal with those tough emotions. Where do we go from here?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. Shi Heng Yi takes this whole self-mastery thing a step further, and he connects it to, well, the power of our words and thoughts.
But wait, hold on. Is he saying our thoughts and words actually have, they can influence what happens to us?
That's exactly what he's saying.
Okay, I got to hear more about this.
He argues that our thoughts and words, they're just as powerful as our actions, maybe even more so. And he really emphasizes being careful with our words, because even if we apologize later, they can leave a mark.
It's like that whole sticks and stones saying, words totally do hurt.
Right. He even touches on this idea of the law of attraction, basically, that what we focus on in our thoughts and our words can shape what happens in our lives.
Okay, the law of attraction, that's a big one. Lots of people talk about that. It's super interesting to hear a Buddhist monk's perspective on it. Does he share any personal stories about this idea?
He does. He talks about how he became a lot more mindful of his own speech, and he realized that by controlling his thoughts and words, he could actually influence his actions and ultimately, his own destiny.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's like a chain reaction. Mastering our thoughts leads to mastering our words, which then influences our actions and shapes our lives.
You got it. And that's basically what Shi Heng Yi is arguing. By developing this deep self-control, we're not just influencing our own internal state, we're shaping the world around us too.
This is really blowing my mind. Okay, there's just one more thing I got to ask about. Shi Heng Yi mentions some things that sound a bit, well, mystical. Like he talks about energies, frequencies, and even something called the third eye.
Right. That's where his perspective takes this really fascinating turn. He admits he can't scientifically prove these energies exist. But he observes that tons of cultures throughout history have described similar things, just using different language.
Oh, like what? What are some examples?
He talks about vibrations, frequencies, light and darkness, all pointing to this realm that's beyond our five senses.
Okay, now we're getting really deep. So what about this third eye thing? I've definitely heard that before, but not sure what it actually means.
It's super interesting. It shows up in all sorts of spiritual traditions, from Buddhism to Egyptian mythology. And while the interpretations differ, it often represents a deeper level of perception or awareness.
Wow. Okay. It makes you wonder if there really is something more to it than we realize.
Right. And that's part of what makes Shi Heng Yi's perspective so captivating. He's saying, hey, let's explore these deeper layers of ourselves in the world, Maybe there's a whole other realm of experience we can unlock if we master ourselves and really open our minds.
Wow, we've covered so much already, and I feel like we're just getting started. Before we go any further, though, I want to give our listeners something to think about.
I like that. Give them something to chew on.
All right, listener, here's a question for you. What part of your life could use a little more self-control? And what would it mean for you to experience true freedom? Think about that for a bit. We'll be back soon to explore more of Shi Heng Yi's wisdom and see how all this can help us cultivate more freedom and control in our own lives.
Can't wait to dive back in. Those are some pretty deep questions to leave our listener with. It really makes you think about what freedom actually means, right?
For sure. And it ties back to what we've been discussing with Shi Heng Yi, this idea that freedom isn't just about external circumstances, it's about this deep inner sense of self-mastery.
Yeah. And what I find really refreshing about Shi Heng Yi is he's not afraid to talk about, the hard parts of this whole self-mastery thing. He acknowledges that it's tough, it's a struggle, especially when it comes to things like our emotions.
Totally. It's not like he's pretending it's easy to just suddenly become, perfectly in control of yourself. He's honest about the challenges.
Yeah, he's real about it. Remember that analogy he used about anger, the one with the wood for winter?
Oh, yeah. That was so powerful. Basically, he's saying that if you let your anger run wild, it's like you're burning up all those resources you've carefully built up,
Yeah.
and you could end up destroying your relationships and everything.
It's a really vivid image, and it highlights how destructive those unchecked emotions can be, not just to us, but to the people around us too.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that our emotions have consequences, just like our actions do.
Right. And so he emphasizes that we got to build like a healthy relationship with our emotions, especially those difficult ones. It's not about pretending they don't exist or trying to suppress them completely.
It's more about understanding them and like learning how to deal with them in a way that doesn't cause harm.
Exactly. It's like, okay, you're feeling angry. Now what? How can you respond to that anger without letting it control you or hurt others?
I'm starting to see this connection between self-control and how we interact with the world around us. Shi Heng Yi even talks about how this extends to our thoughts and our words.
Totally. He's saying that just like our actions have consequences, so do our thoughts and words. And that's where he brings in that fascinating concept of the law of attraction.
Oh, the law of attraction. I got to hear more about this.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that, like, a lot of people are curious about, but it can also seem a little mysterious, even magical to some. How does he approach it from a Buddhist perspective?
He acknowledges that, he can't offer scientific proof for how it all works, but he sees it as this kind of like natural principle that governs the universe. Like what we focus on, both in our thoughts and in our words, tends to manifest in our reality.
So it's not about just wishing for something and having it magically appear. It's more about, like, the energy we're putting out into the world.
Right. It's about aligning our thoughts, words, and actions with what we truly desire. And that, of course, takes a good deal of self-awareness and self-control.
Okay, I see the connection now. It's not about passive wishing. It's about active intention.
Exactly.
This is all starting to come together, this whole idea of the monastic discipline, the focus on balance, mastering our emotions, the power of words and thoughts. It's all pointing back to the central idea that true freedom comes from cultivating that deep sense of self-mastery.
You're getting it. And I think it's important to point out that this isn't about becoming some kind of emotionless robot.
Yeah, no fun in that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Shi Heng Yi isn't saying we should just suppress our individuality or desires or anything like that.
So it's not about denying ourselves, but more about making conscious choices.
Right. It's about recognizing that we have a choice in how we respond to things, both internally and externally. And that choice, that's ultimately what gives us true freedom.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, I can't let us move on without coming back to that whole third eye concept that Shi Heng Yi brought up. He talked about how so many different cultures throughout history have described these kinds of ideas, even if they use different words for them.
Yeah. It's super interesting how this concept of the third eye appears in so many different traditions, often symbolizing like this deeper level of perception or awareness. He even mentioned how, while modern science may not be able to measure these energies yet, many cultures have known about and worked with these energies for centuries.
It's like he's saying there's a whole other way of perceiving the world that we're not even tapping into.
Exactly. And when he talks about things like vibrations, frequencies, light, and darkness, it seems like he's pointing to this realm of experience that's beyond our ordinary senses.
Okay, so we're talking about more than just what we can see, hear, touch, taste, and smell, right?
Right. Like there's more to reality than what our physical senses can pick up on.
Yeah.
And he seems to be suggesting that through practices like meditation and mindfulness, we can start to access these more subtle layers of awareness.
This is getting really deep. It really makes you wonder what other possibilities might be out there just waiting to be discovered.
That's the exciting part. Shi Heng Yi isn't just giving us a set of rules or dogmas. He's saying, hey, let's explore, let's question, let's push past the limits of what we think we know.
It's like he's inviting us to expand our definition of what's possible.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the things that makes his perspective so compelling. It's not just about mastering ourselves, it's about expanding our awareness of what's possible, both within ourselves and in the world around us.
You know, I'm starting to think that what Shi Heng Yi is teaching, it's like a powerful antidote to all the anxiety and uncertainty we face in modern life. Because in a world where we're constantly bombarded with information and external pressures, this message of finding freedom through inner control, it feels incredibly relevant.
I totally agree. There's something very empowering about realizing that we're not just at the mercy of our circumstances. We have the power to cultivate inner strength and resilience no matter what's happening around us.
It's like he's saying true freedom is about finding that unshakable center within ourselves. a place of calm and clarity that can't be disturbed by all the chaos of life.
And that's the kind of freedom worth striving for, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's a freedom that comes from understanding ourselves, mastering our emotions, and choosing our thoughts and words with intention. It's a freedom that allows us to live with more purpose and meaning.
It's a journey of self-discovery.
So the big question is, how do we actually put all this into practice? It's one thing to talk about self-control and freedom, but how do we actually make it happen in our everyday lives?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Well, one of the key takeaways from Shi Heng Yi is the importance of mindfulness. You know, that whole idea of paying attention to our thoughts, feelings, and sensations in the present moment without judgment.
Mindfulness. I hear that word everywhere these days. But what does it actually mean in the context of Shi Heng Yi's teachings?
For him, mindfulness is about cultivating this heightened awareness of our present moment experience. Like, what are we thinking? What are we feeling? What sensations are we experiencing in our body? What's happening around us? And it's about observing these things as they arise without getting swept away by them.
It sounds pretty straightforward, but I bet it's way harder than it sounds.
Oh, for sure, it takes effort and practice. But even a few minutes each day can make a huge difference. The key is to train our minds to be more still, more present, more aware.
Okay, so it's about becoming more aware of our inner world, our thoughts, our emotions, and all that. But how do we actually develop that?
Meditation is a big one. Even just a few minutes each day of, like, focusing on your breath can help a lot. But he also emphasizes that mindfulness isn't just something you do on a meditation cushion. It's a way of being.
So like being mindful throughout the day.
Exactly. Simple things like paying attention to how it feels to walk or eat or even wash the dishes. Those can be mindfulness practices too.
That's a good point. It doesn't have to be this big formal thing. It's more about bringing that sense of presence and awareness to whatever you're doing.
You got it. It's about shifting our attention from that constant chatter in our heads to the direct experience of what's happening right now.
So we've talked about mindfulness. Let's circle back to what Shi Heng Yi said about the power of words. How can we actually apply that in our day-to-day lives?
Well, he gave some really helpful advice. Before you speak, he says, pause for a second and ask yourself 4 questions.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are the 4 questions?
First, is it true?
Meaning, like, are the words I'm about to say actually accurate and honest?
Exactly. Second, he says, is it kind?
Ah, yeah, thinking about how our words are going to impact other people.
Right. Third, is it necessary? Like, do I really need to say this right now?
That's a good one. Sometimes silence is golden.
For sure. And the fourth question is this the right time?
Okay, so thinking about the timing and context of our words.
You got it. So it's not about being afraid to speak our minds. It's about cultivating this awareness of the power our words hold.
Yeah, I like that. It's about being more intentional with our communication. And it reminds me of that whole law of attraction thing again. You know, the idea that our thoughts and words can actually shape our reality.
Yeah. And while we may not fully grasp how it works, there's definitely something to be said for the power of positive thinking and affirmations.
It's almost like we're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy with our thoughts and words.
Right. If we're constantly dwelling on negativity, well, we're more likely to experience more negativity. But if we cultivate those positive thoughts and beliefs, we open ourselves up to all sorts of new possibilities.
It's kind of like we're programming our own reality in a way.
Exactly. And it all comes back to self-control. By mastering our thoughts and words, we're essentially taking control of our inner world.
And ultimately, that gives us more control over our lives, our experiences, and even the world around us.
That's the power of self-mastery.
You know, it's incredible how everything we've talked about, monastic life, the power of words, mastering our emotions, it all points back to this idea of self-mastery. It's like Shi Heng Yi is giving us this roadmap to, like, unlock true freedom from within.
Yeah. And one of the things that really stands out to me is how he gives us these practical tools. You know, he doesn't just talk about these concepts in a vague way. He offers real ways to integrate them into our daily lives.
Absolutely. And one of the most important tools he emphasizes is mindfulness.
Right. Mindfulness is huge EE these days.
It is. But I feel like it's one of those things that gets thrown around a lot, and people might not really understand what it actually means, especially in the context of what Shi Heng Yi is teaching.
Yeah, it can definitely be a bit of a buzzword. For Shi Heng Yi, mindfulness is all about cultivating a deeper awareness of our present moment experience. So, like, what are we thinking? What emotions are we feeling? What sensations are we noticing in our body? What's happening around us? And it's about observing these things as they come up without getting totally caught up in them.
So instead of being swept away by our thoughts and emotions, we're kind of stepping back and observing them.
Exactly. It's like creating some space between ourselves and our experience so we can choose how to respond rather than just react automatically.
Okay, so we're not trying to stop our thoughts or feelings, but we're learning to relate to them differently. But how do we actually do that? Our minds are so busy, it's hard to just suddenly become super mindful.
It definitely takes practice. Meditation is a big part of it. Even a few minutes each day, just focusing on your breath can make a huge difference. Like a workout for your mind, you know? You're training it to become more still and more focused.
Right, like building that mental muscle.
Yeah. But Shi Heng Yi also emphasizes that mindfulness isn't limited to, like, formal meditation. It's something we can bring into every aspect of our lives.
So it's more like a way of being in the world.
Exactly. Even something as simple as, like, paying really close attention to the sensations of walking or eating or washing the dishes. Those can all become mindfulness practices.
I like that. It makes mindfulness feel a lot more accessible. You know, it's not this big, complicated thing. It's about bringing a sense of awareness and presence to whatever you're doing, even the ordinary stuff.
Totally. It's about shifting our focus from all that mental chatter to the direct experience of what's happening right now.
Okay, I'm really digging this idea of mindfulness. Now let's talk about the power of words again. Shi Heng Yi made this really interesting connection between self-control and the words we choose to speak. He talked about how our words can have this lasting impact on ourselves and on others.
Yeah, that was powerful. It's so easy to just say things without thinking and then later realize, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. But the words are already out there.
Exactly. And even if we apologize, the impact might still be there. So how can we actually be more mindful about our speech?
Well, Shi Heng Yi gave us some really good advice for that. He said, before we speak, it's helpful to pause and ask ourselves 4 questions.
Okay, I'm ready. What are the questions?
The first one is it true?
So basically, are the words I'm about to say accurate and honest? Am I speaking from a place of truth?
Exactly. The second question is it kind?
Yeah, thinking about how our words might affect other people.
Right. Third question is it necessary?
Oh, I like that one. Sometimes it's better to just say nothing at all.
Totally. And the last question is this the right time?
Okay, so being mindful of the timing and context of what we're saying.
Exactly. It's not about censoring ourselves or being afraid to speak up. It's just about cultivating a sense of responsibility for the words that come out of our mouths. And Shi Heng Yi reminds us that our words actually have a vibrational frequency, just like everything else in the universe.
So every word we speak is like sending out a ripple of energy.
Yeah. And that ties back into that whole law of attraction thing. The words we choose, the thoughts we focus on, they all contribute to the reality we create for ourselves.
It's like we're constantly shaping our world, both internally and externally, with every thought and every word.
And that's super empowering when you think about it. We're not just passive bystanders in our own lives. We have this incredible power to create positive change.
Wow. That's a really inspiring way to think about it. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to emphasize one really important point that Shi Heng Yi makes. He reminds us that this journey to self-mastery and true freedom, it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, it's not like we just arrive at some destination and then we're done. It's about continuous growth and learning.
Exactly. There are going to be challenges, setbacks, and moments of frustration along the way. That's part of the process. But the key is to be patient with ourselves, keep practicing, and learn from our mistakes.
And with dedication and a willingness to keep exploring, we can cultivate a deeper sense of freedom and control in our lives.
So, to our listener, we encourage you to take what you've learned from this deep dive and start experimenting with it. Try out some mindfulness practices, pay attention to your thoughts and words, and remember, true freedom lies within your own grasp.
And hey, who knows? Maybe you'll even tap into the power of your third eye along the way.
Yeah, that's a thought-provoking note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with more explorations into the world of knowledge and personal growth. Until then, keep diving deep.